So with Siyata Shmaya, let's jump back into our learning. Last week we spoke a lot outside, and this time we're going to try to make headway in this mimer, the first of a number of maimarim from Rav Kluger's Sefer Yichar Shabbos, which is also the first volume in a multi-volume set. I think there are 3 volumes as of now, all on Shabbos, each and every aspect and element. So we've been trying to learn from Rav Kluger as much as we can, a particularly sweet Torah that I am personally very connected with, and I think really reflects the nature of what our generation is looking for in the shiur between Nigla and Nister, and really drawing on many sources. It's a very broad enterprise, his learning and his teaching. And so over here we're looking at the first mimer on L'chadaidi. So let us jump in. Actually, we said that last week we were going to do a bit of review, but it ended up taking us lots of time. So let's turn the page over. And this is still by way of review because we already did this 2 weeks ago, but let's jump into the paragraph that begins, Thanks for coming, Rabbi. And before, I will just make a bracha, if that's okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarei. Amen. Okay. Let's flip the first page over, and it begins. May Hashem rejoice upon you, like a chassan rejoices over his bride, over his kala. So in accordance with what's been explained in the previous paragraph, which we already learned, that the primary joy that takes place in the days of marriage, why does everybody love a wedding so much? And we explained, if you remember 2 weeks ago, when we were speaking about the dynamic of a wedding and why everyone's so happy by a wedding, we spoke about the multiple aspects, the layers of joy that exist. We spoke about Rabbi Nachman's interpretation on the pasuk Vayichad Yisrael Kol HaTova, that when a person is able to access the realm, so to speak, of Kol HaTova, over there they find the Achdus in it, the Echad Yachad Miyuchad, the way that Hashem is present in every facet and every aspect of this. And so Vayichad Yisrael is a form of the word Echad. Vayichad Yisrael Memela Al Kol HaTova, right? That's the ultimate level of joy. But fundamentally what's really taking place when a husband and wife get together is a Bayis Nosaf B'Yisrael. Is a new house, is a new home, is a third entity that isn't simply 2 people coming together, but something new is born, something new in partnership, of course, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the Shechina that is shochen, that's dwelling between these 2 neshamas, that ultimately fuse into a sum that's or a total that's greater than the sum of its parts. That's called the Bayis Noisaf. Yisrael that these 2 people in coming together will be able to bring about yichudim, because of course the Isha is the spiritual manifestation, the vessel for the aspect of the indwelling presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we call the Shechina, and the male is reflecting the transcendent element, God as God, so to speak, beyond, right, in and of himself, kiviyachol. And when they come together, so memela, they're able to forge and pave the way in terms of their creative processes to bring about a new neshama into the world, which is the tachlis for why the husband and wife are getting married in the first place. From the standpoint of the Torah, is puravu. As the Gemara tells us, everybody knows why the chassid and the kala are walking to the chuppah. It's to ultimately be able to bring new neshamas into the world. Loila tobara, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says through the Nevi'im, Hashem didn't create the world to be empty, rather l'sheves yitzar, Hashem created for it to be settled. So now, when we think in a very deep way about this being the ultimate tachlis of the husband and wife getting together, thank you so much. I wasn't able to reach her, so I figured, okay. So ultimately, if this is the tachlis of the husband and wife getting together, and they are only kalim for these much deeper concepts, for these much more existential truths that are reflected in terms of the back-end code, kibiyachol, that end up showing up in this world as this thing called the Isha and as this other thing called the Ish, the husband and the wife, respectively. And in their union, they're coming together to meet, to create, to bring about, to allow to emerge a new mitzias, which means the Vlad, the child, right? The Yeled, the Tinok that's born, the Ezras Hashem, from this union. So then, ultimately, if we trace this dynamic back up to the root code, right, where the male is not the chassan, he's mamish kutchabrichu, so to speak, and the isha is not the wife or the kala, but is shchinte, is the shchina. So then we understand that the union, so to speak, which takes place where we already learned in our own experience, in our own way of looking, in our own way of experiencing reality, looking at other people, understanding ourselves, understanding history, understanding all the different experiences that are to be had, the manifold experiences of the human condition. So we are the ones that are creating the yichud by virtue of us allowing ourselves to find the Creator, which is Kutchabrichu, within the revelation of His godliness, which we call Olam Hazeh, right, which houses the Shechina K'viyachol. So Memela, what's the tachlis for that? It's Ish and Isha getting together, Shechina Shuri B'Neim. For what purpose? To bring about a new Metzias. Right? And fundamentally, that's exactly what the world was created for. Because the world in and of itself was incomplete. The Sheishas Yamim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, everything was incomplete until Adam Rishon came to the world. But was that it? Meaning, was when Adam Rishon, thank you so much for coming, when Adam Rishon was brought into the world, so that was it? Avada not. Why was Adam Rishon brought to the world? La'avda u'lishamra. To work the world, to cultivate the world, to pray for rain. You remember I mentioned in one of my previous shiurim, I can't remember in this series or something else, where last week, right? Yeah, I think so, where the grass is just below the surface. Did I say that last week? Right? And then Adam Rishon is meant to daven to allow a new Metzias to emerge. So as Yidden, we can never, ever, ever accept the status quo. What our bumper sticker, so to speak, nationally speaking, needs to be, we are against the status quo. That's what Yidden are all about. Kol zman that the world has not yet manifested the ultimate revelation of the Shechina, which is the realm of the Yemais HaMashiach, with all of what that means, we are against the status quo. We simply cannot allow ourselves to be dragged into the Metzias, to the realities of this worldly geopolitics, let's say, on that level, or communal aspects of the way that we live within our community. We have to be people that are mamish, fundamentally against the status quo. And in so doing, we embody the aspect of Adam Elyon, who was there la'avda u'lishama, to cultivate the world, to bring about yichudim between these two aspects of Kutchabrichu and Shchinte, and in so doing, they're able to bring a new child into the world, meaning that with the collaboration, kiviyachol, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael, within this Metzias, we create a new Metzias, we forge a new reality. So this is just very important as an aside, as we're learning about the joy that underlies our celebration at a Jewish wedding, which is fundamentally at its core not really about just we're happy that this person found someone that he or she respectively can build their lives together. Avada, that's a part of the simcha. But if you think about at the core of it, this is another step toward the Geula Shlema.
So is this concept that I'm happy that you picked those words, but we're also happy about this person finding the other person.
Yeah.
But is that also the lesson to be learned on the concept of the Shechina Begalusa and coming together with, what was the other aspect?
HaKadosh Baruch Hu or Kutchabrichu.
So is that the idea also that just like the Ish and the Isha, they start separate and they're looking for each other and they finally find each other. The concept too is because it's Chosam Nakala is that they're finding each other in the Galas.
Avada. Right.
Right.
And what I'm being mechadish here is that the ultimate purpose of that yichud is for something then to occur, right? Just like the ultimate purpose of the yichud between husband and wife is the building of this bias.
What's the ultimate purpose of the child, which is
So
born?
let's
to get married again to what's
well everything exists within its relative structure vis-a-vis its phase or stage. Right, so we have to see everything in its own. From this standpoint, let's take it back a step. Right, within the mashal of a husband and wife bringing a child into the world, as Hashem, all of us should be zaycheh as Hashem at the right time, and in accordance with the Kodesh Baruch Hu's plan for our tikkunim. So in that place, on that level, kiviyachol, bringing a child into the world is the representation of the way in which, when these two people came together, something new occurred. There was a new Metzias. Translating that back into the Nimshal, because that's the mashal, so to speak. Translating that back into the Nimshal is that fundamentally the whole world can change. And again, going back to a previous shiur, I think it was 2 shiurim ago, nothing pragmatic needs to change. let's say we'll still eat in the Yemaisa Mashiach, let's say, before Olam Haba, let's say, right? It just in Yemaisa Mashiach, which at least according to the Rambam is a purely technical endeavor. There's no big giluyim per se. Maybe Mashiach b'chvoid of Atzmai will need to have a giluy to let him know that he's mamash Mashiach. I don't know. But the point is that our reality as it currently is has all the ingredients necessary for utopia, barring natural disaster. But whatever falls within the realms of human caused either progress or chas v'shalom pain, the ground is paved. What's needed is not a fundamental shift in the nature of the way that things are. What's needed is a fundamental shift in the nature of the way that humans experience the things that already are. And when we take that perspective, so gewalt, like we can mamish change the world. Because there aren't, like I always say, 8 billion people in the world. There is one person 8 billion times. And in as much as a person has strong enough ideas and persuasive enough concepts that are rooted in an exalted, holy place that is enough to change one person's life, which all of us have, Baruch Hashem, we can reach the world. We can reach the world. And on the contrary, the nature of there being so many different people with so many different ways of thinking and so many different lenses through which they see, for example, different narratives, which is obviously a buzzword, so to speak, today, is different narratives. It's very important to be able to, to appreciate different perspectives and really take them all in to see it, the biggest possible picture that we can see, which is still so incredibly limited vis-a-vis the MS, which none of us know, right? But fundamentally, in as much as we can, so it causes us to further clarify the nature of the message, and it irons it out clearer and clearer, so that it can be exported to the broadest possible audience in such a way that there's something relevant in it when we get it down to its core that could reach every single human being. And that's the ultimate Vlad, as it were. That's the ultimate child that is going to come about by virtue of this yichud between Kodesh B'richu Hashem and us finding or revealing the Creator toch within His creation, which is called the Shechina. And in as much as we live lives that are rooted on these principles, so that Memela, very naturally speaking, everything can be different. But it requires all of us. It's a human partnership, hopefully led by an inspired Jewish nation. Okay, but we have to push forward because this is still all in Chazara world, and we, it's all good, but we want to see what Rav Kluger also says. Okay, so he says, the whole entire world is thirsty for the revelation of the light of the divine. So all aspects of the recipient, of the receiver, which is the Bria Mitzad Atzmai, the creation in and of itself, without its being illuminated and activated by the presence of the Creator, which is the Mashpia, so it's in a perpetual state of being parched and starving. The aspect of, again, using the mashal of let's say an isha that is feeling lonely, and even an ish, but an isha where there's a feeling of being incomplete, right? Ra'iv. Ukebaya ar. But when the great light, hamashpia, of the transcendent male, kiviyachol, giver aspect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when that is revealed, hareza avuroi ke geula pratis mamish, like we learned in the previous shiur, this is an aspect of geula. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because with you is the mekar chaim, which means that Hashem is the mashpia. So ba'archa, when your light is revealed, nira'ar, everything is illuminated. We're not alone. We have guidance. We have clarity. Guidance can only be the process of the one who is, or the result of the presence of the one who is guiding. Memela, we have guidance. But us, in and of ourselves, we're wandering around like lost sheep. Mamish, like the pasuk says, "Te'isi kaseh oived." We're wandering without Hashem. We don't have clarity. What are we here for? Why are we here? What direction should we be moving in order to alleviate the pain of a human family that continues to attempt to construct its own meaning structures that necessarily cause more destruction than construction, in the sense that none of us really know, like, what's the point? So if we're without guidance, so then what do we need? We need a guide. And when the guide is revealed, like the lashon that comes from Sukkah, Moira Nevuchim, it's a guide for those that are perplexed. What a geula that is. What a freedom that is. There's movement now. I'm not stuck and constrained in the realm of doubt, in the realm of obscurity. Ki imcha mekar chayim ba'archa, so then nira ar. Geula sheyisoida ahava v'dveikos, and especially since it's founded on this relationship, the love that Hashem has for us and for all of His creations. Yismach Hashem b'masa. So this is what Shabbos is all about. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will rejoice upon Am Yisrael like a chasin, like the groom, al kala with the bride. At these moments when Shabbos is coming in, which is the symbol, again, Shabbos, qua Shabbos, the sphere of Malchus, Me'ein Olam Haba, is a bit of a taste of what the world could look like, which, like we said in previous shiurim, is why there is no construction on Shabbos, because in a certain aspect, like we learned last week, it's a taste of the realm within which everything's already okay, which fundamentally is true, but not in the current state of the way that we perceive things, which is why there's so much work to do, La'avda L'Shamar, within the 6 days of the week, like we explained at great length last week. But when those great moments of Shabbos begin to shine, fundamentally, the 6 days of the week, which themselves are the aspect of the bride, which themselves are the aspect of unguided wandering within a world of mundanity, within a world of physicality, within a world that's completely and entirely, so to speak, guided, but not in an objective way, that is, let's say, founded upon personal, objective enterprise goals, mamish limited to our own experiences. The 6 days of the week is the aspect of the bride. So then Shabbos is revealed. What's Shabbos? We say in the Tefillah, Shabbos is Tachlis, Maaseh, Shamayim Va'aretz, meaning Shabbos is the guide. Shabbos is the great light, because Shabbos is a taste of what all of the working is for. What are we trying to accomplish in our human experience? Why are we doing all the mitzvahs? To fortify what consciousness? For what purpose? Because we have a message to the world. Because we're supposed to be the priesthood nation. We're supposed to be Mamlechas Kohanim B'Goy Kodesh. We're supposed to be those that are so plugged into this healthy way of interacting with reality through the eyes of faith, so that ultimately we can bring about the yichud and give birth, kiviyachol, to a new metzias. That's what Shabbos teaches. So the 6 days of the week is illuminated by the light of Shabbos. That's a deeper understanding of what we also say in the Chadayid, even though he doesn't say it right here, but I think he will discuss it at some point, when we say that Shabbos is Mikar HaBracha. Because in a certain sense, again, let's repeat. Shabbos is always the Makabel. Shabbos is the Isha. Shabbos is Malchus. And we said everything is in a relative framework. In one sense, Shabbos is receiving from the 6 days of the week. Remember we discussed this in the first year in the Chadaydi, I think, or the second. In one sense, Shabbos is the Makabel. But in this sense, Shabbos is Mamish the Mashpia. By the way, let's just lift this idea out of its current context. The same is true for the very sphera of Malchus, which would seem to be the ultimate receiver, but in another sense is actually paradoxically the Mashpia. How so? How is Malchus the Mashpia? Aside from the way in which we, Kiviyachol, give back to Hashem a more perfect world, that's true, but that's in partnership with Him. How would Malchus represent the one that's guiding? If it's the one that's fundamentally receiving all the lights that come down. And the answer is, I speak about this in chapter 2 of the story of our lives. Not sure if that's why you did a half smile, but we speak about it in the story of our lives, chapter 2, where fundamentally, because Malchus is the purpose for which there is chesed and then gvura and the tiferes and the netzach and the hoid and yesod, all of these different spheres, each one contributing to the further sort of clarification of the divine energy as it needs to manifest different parameters until it finally comes into Malchus. It was all guided toward Malchus, kiviyachol, by Malchus, in the sense that, yes, the person that draws up a blueprint for the house that they're trying to build, all of that work and getting the materials together and working out the finances and then actually going through the process of putting the materials together in such a way where you can build the house, ultimately that's what's mashpia on the building of the house. But you know what really was the mashpia of the building of the house? The built house. Because without the machshava tchila, which is bound up, soif maseh b'machshava tchila, which is also from L'chadaydi, with the final product, he never would have been stirred, so to speak, to go through all the steps. So the same is true for Malchus itself, and certainly the same is true for Shabbos. So Shabbos has an aspect where it is impacted by the 6 days of the week, and we said that's what Reb Tzadok says in his first Maimer on Shabbos in Pri Tzadok, where Reb Tzadok says over there that Kisheishis Yom Asa Hashem Asa Shemaim Asa Arts, and then Sheishis Yamim Tavad Vasisa Kamalachtecha, and then Uyam Hashvi Shabbos Hashem Alikecha. That the degree to which we'll experience Shabbos is directly correlated with the work that we put in during the week, and there's emes to that. But then the flip of that is maybe even more emes because it's more dak. I would say in a more conceptual, abstract sense, the emes Shabbos is the real mekabel. I would say benigla Shabbos is the result of the 6 days of the week. Benister, the 6 days of the week was already being mekabel from the etzem uvda of the fact that Shabbos was where all this was headed, and that's why we refer to Shabbos as kihi mikar habracha. Let's just finish this paragraph, and we'll stop again for questions. Then we'll go into new uncharted territory, which we've been waiting to learn for like a month now. Okay. So just like a wedding, which is the celebration of the physical, pragmatic manifestation of something that fundamentally is happening b'pnim pnimius. So Shabbos all the more so. Shabbos is mamish, the revelation, or a taste of the revelation, which sits at the core of our joy over a wedding, but it's beyond the surface. But on Shabbos, that is what's taking place. It's the joy over the thing in and of itself. There is a great merging of the lower realms of the physical corporeal realms with the higher spiritual realms, and it's a simcha b'elyonim b'tachtonim. Therefore, it's a time of tremendous rejoicing b'elyonim b'tachtonim. Kasher klal Yisrael heim merkava l'kol anifal v'hanasa, where Am Yisrael are the ones that are in the driver's seat, so to speak. And we realize how crucial we are for the ultimate revelation that is our historical mandate from the beginning of time into the end of time, and the degree to which we've lived up to this is a matter of contention, and ought to give us real pause for thought. Like how much have we done this in an active sense throughout our history? Certainly in a I would say in a sort of passive aspect, or in a non-pragmatic aspect, through our Avodas Hashem, through our Torah, through our Tefillah, through our mitzvah observance, Avada, we were impacting all the worlds. But in terms of having a practical impact, to really step into our role to say we have something that we'd like to share with the world. Not that the world really gave us any opportunity to do that. And also, another aspect of this is that our doctrines fundamentally sat at the core of the Judeo-Christian values that sat at least in the founding documents of the United States, in as much as that has become a beacon of at least some kind, at least in relation to history and what the monarchies looked like and what different movements, communism, fascism, and so on and so forth looked like. So Baruch Hashem, we've made we've done something, but it's painful, I think, to a Jew at the very, very end of time looking back, even though it's all Ratzon Hashem, this is all guided by the Presence of Hashem, how little active impact, direct impact, Yidden as Yidden have had in the position of being the Rebbe. It's almost as if it's like a person is a Rebbe in a classroom, let's say, or a teacher in a classroom, and they have a whole curriculum that they ought to give over, and the students learn nothing from the curriculum itself, but they pick up like a few good life hacks because the Rebbe knows how to put his jacket on by just, not sleeve by sleeve, but he has this way of just flipping it over and boom, and they're like, wow, okay. So they learned something from the Rebbe, but it was so indirect. So the world learned something from us, through Jewish ideas filtered through Christianity, filtered through Islam, filtered through the way that democracies are founded fundamentally on, human dignity that's rooted in biblical texts, or, what's that? Or science.
The development of science in a rational way has come from Christianity.
In a sense, yes, but it's right. So all of these are indirect, and from the standpoint of being able to stand up and assert in unequivocal, eloquent, universal terms what it is that we mamish came to bring to the world, which is the light of radical monotheism, which fundamentally means that you can experience every single split second as an interaction with the divine, and that fundamentally we're all here for a greater purpose, and that it's not about one nation or other nations, and it's not about any this worldly nationalistic aspirations, maybe Zionism included, but that's a very complicated topic, particularly now. And we are mamish souls, like we're the human isn't the human. We're just sparks of the divine having a physical experience. Like the degree to which we haven't even been privy to the teachings within our own tradition that would have helped us think in this way throughout history up until very, very recently is on the one hand sad, and on the other hand, from the standpoint of emunah, exactly how it was always supposed to be. But what's unequivocally clear now is that we have an opportunity as a community to begin to really embrace the deepest experience of Yiddishkeit as it always was supposed to be, meaning to see halacha as not, a system of behavior in and of itself with its own intrinsic value, even though there is intrinsic value from the spiritual standpoint, but rather as like I say, an immersive spiritual experience where every yontif and every mitzvah in the realm of time, in the realm of space, every single stage of life with all the ritualistic aspects of the tradition are here to fortify and to foster a spirit, a way of thinking, a way of speaking, and then to find ways to directly export these ideas in a universalist fashion to be able to reach the nations of the world. And there's never that.
And then what?
And then Be'ezus
What have
Hashem.
we reached, though?
What's that?
And then what have we reached?
And then what will we have reached? We will Be'ezus Hashem have achieved to the extent that is possible for us a human experience that's as close to the visions of the Nevi'im as possible, barring a total revelation of spirituality. That's also foretold by the Nevi'im, which is the source for the machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban, in terms of exactly what Olam Haba looks like. But we will have achieved fundamentally the purpose for which this world was created, which is Gilui Elokus, Yichud Elyon, Dira B'Tachtonim. That's why we're here. Yeah, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, thanks. As you mentioned earlier about on the one hand Shabbos is in the Kabbalah, on the one hand Shabbos is in the Shiur.
Right.
But I always understood that Shabbos is in the Kabbalah for the 6 days before, and then Mashpia in the 6 days after.
In a sense, yes. In a sense, that's true.
In the same way that as you were talking before about Malchus, that Malchus in itself kind of drove the whole process.
All true. Both are true.
But what might be conceived in a step as Malchus is actually only the step for the next step. As we go through life, we always think this is it until we reach the next thing. So Shabbos is similarly, we reach Shabbos and we think, okay, fine, this is it. But then we're not realizing that actually, no, this is all a build-up for what's coming next.
That's right. And I would also remind you that in a Chanami, from the standpoint of a given Shabbos, it was impacted by the previous 6 days and it's mashpia. But those previous 6 days were also impacted by the Shabbos before it. Yeah. We mentioned, and this maybe is the resolution of the machlokes, whether it's one Shabbos that all of Am Yisrael needs to keep in order for the world to be redeemed, or two. And I think we said from the Berditchever that fundamentally it's one teaching, because in as much as we have one real strong Shabbos, it impacts the week enough so that week will memela impact the next Shabbos. So one Shabbos is always going to be two Shabbosim. Yeah.
It's interesting that you touched on the idea of nationalism because how I understand how Cook sees it is that we haven't been able to have influence throughout history because we've been individuals rather than as Am Yisrael as a whole. And then he used the model of what was popular at his time of liberal European nationalism to explain how if Am Yisrael was all together in one place, then we can have the world as we're meant to.
Right. When I said when I threw sure. When I threw the word nationalism in there, I meant in the colloquial, contemporary secular sense, as opposed to an exalted idea of Jewish nationalism, which was never defined by the parameters of a nation among nations, as Zionism. At least some trends of early Zionism started to phrase it that way, but was seen as sure. I mean, we were always a nation, but the parameters of this very strange thing called the Jewish nation, which can't be defined by ethnicity and can't be defined by color or by race or by creed or even by land, right, or where a person lives, even though unequivocally Eretz Yisrael is our homeland. Aside from that, right? sure, we're a nation, and not only are we a nation that ought to embrace that real, but I would say the spiritual definition of nationalism, which should sit at the core, as Rav Kook believed it should, of whatever physical, practical nationalistic aspirations were had, and also can be refined over time, as it has been refined over time, and the process continues. Can potentially have in the future, but more than that, in order, and this is a crucial point, in order for us to do the job that we need to do vis-a-vis the Umas Ha'olam, we have to become more and more Jewish, like more and more particular, in order to then clarify deeply enough how it is that we are so different and where we can be of service in terms of what our unique message is, to then unequivocally take that message and find ways of bringing it with total clarity and a degree of reformulation to find the right terms in order to use that are relevant within the current context, for sure. And that's why Kodesh Baruch Hu says, "Heim am levada yishkan v'goyim lo yischashav," but not because we're fundamentally better and they're worse, or any of the other kinds of chas v'shalom, limited interpretations of that. But on the contrary, if we are to do our role, Hein am levada yishkan, we better live apart. We better, because we have a unique role to play. We have a unique role to play. So, but it's very crucial that it doesn't just remain particularism. It's particularism for the sake of universalism. And we need to see ourselves on one strata of our personality as humans among a human family. And then, more specifically, in terms of, okay, but now what, right? We're Yidden. And the more that we become Yidden, the more likely it will be to use all aspects of Jewish culture, political included, by the way, to be able to share the light that we were always intended to share. So it's so fascinating. You can even say that the light of Am Yisrael is so big that even when we were not at all trying to share it, it anyway leaked out. It in the sciences, even secular Jews whose Jewishness wasn't a part of they were also a light unto the nations in their own way, and just by osmosis, Am Yisrael has been such a light, but it pales in comparison into what we can do if we would stand up maybe in a way that we've never stood up before, maybe since the moment that we stood on Har Sinai, and maybe then, maybe even not, dafka because of our integration with the nations of the world, dafka because of the long history and the way that humanity has evolved and developed societally until this moment of postmodernism. Right now we have an opportunity that we've never had before to be able to mamish embrace Hashem's vision for what Yiddishkeit should and could look like, and really change the paradigm.
Isn't one of the fundamental differences between us and the nations of the world as a nation is that the way I see it is that a lot of the every nation for itself, they're basically, the idea is, we're a whole family of the same people with this kind of thing, whereas Klal Yisrael, particularly because of all the different facets that we have, we're a nation embracing the differentness within ourselves in order to be able to.
Right, but the reason we're able to do that is because we are perpetually conscious of the essential kernel that unites us all, which always was the Torah. So there's no way around it. It is impossible to define Judaism and Jews by any other term completely other than connection to the Torah, because to the degree that people are far from that, they can be Zionists, but there are plenty of Christian Zionists. That's not what defines Jewishhood. You can be of Ashkenazic descent, but so are the Germans. That's not where we are. You can be Middle Eastern. You can even be Semitic. So are the Arabs. That's not what defines us. What defines us is a spiritual discipline. That's what defines us. It is a set of moral and ethical principles, and to the degree that we are distant from them, whether communally, personally, in the purest form of what they were always intended to be, that's the degree to which chas v'shalom, our identity is not as pure and as powerful as it could be. Yeah.
Is our makeup as Jews different to the non-Jews? Given non-Jews in terms of neshamas, or is it that a Jew, because really non-Jew keep the Torah as well? It should have to be that he was told X by Hashem and we were told Y by Hashem.
So this is a very delicate question, and to be totally frank with you, it's something that I grapple with, and the reason that I grapple with is because in black letters on white paper, it's very clear that there are sources that hold that there's a fundamental distinction. in terms of our pragmatic, practical, day-to-day interactions and the interactions that we saw from our Gedolim, in terms of like how we actually interacted with the Umas Ha'olam, there was no chiluk, certainly not a fundamental chiluk that would chas v'shalom dehumanize or make it so that they are of lesser value and so on and so forth. Even though there are halachos where obviously, but what can you do, because there are halachos in terms of common sense that your family takes precedence, but that's not a statement of an essential distinction. What do we do with the texts that say that there are ways around it, but ultimately all the ways around it will still not give us the ability to mamish take white out, and cross out, the third chapter in Tanya, which says things that I would never be able to teach publicly just because I don't know how to say them. And so what do I do then? That's part of our tradition. There are some things that are challenging. And by the way, I would like for Muslims to be able to say the same thing about their tradition. Any real knowledgeable Muslim will have to confront certain passages that need to be removed, but they never would because they're Muslims, just like we're Jews. I'm not going to take chas v'shalom sentences in the Gemara, as much as I might not like them and as much as they don't seem to align with modern sentiments, and throw them out, because this is part of our religious text. But what I would like them to do is to admit that not every single text ought to be swallowed hook, line, and sinker in such a way that it will prevent the progress that is more aligned with the general spirit of that tradition. What should we do with it? I like to use the word grapple, and which really means be humble about it. Lo yodea. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that chas v'shalom, I don't walk down the street thinking that I'm any better than any other human being. I walk down the street thinking that I have a unique mission, and that what a privilege to be among those who's conscious of the fact that I'm here to continue to love every single human being, as Rav Chaim Vital clearly writes in Sha'ar Kedusha, we must, echoed by the Tosfos Yantiv, and Rav Kook, of course, felt that v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha, in its broadest sense, is for every tzelem Elokim. So that's a diplomatic answer to a very thorny question. Yeah.
I was asking more in terms of, if I'm fundamentally the same as a non-Jew, then the only reason why I'm giving the Jews stock over myself is practically.
Wait, hold on a second. I'm sorry. Let's just stay focused. Yeah.
So, because there are certain people who espouse values that really, one, humanism is really important, and
right.
humanistic values, and so I'm saying that really I'm no different to non-Jew. It happens to be that I have more of a Christ Amazon because we have to all care for our family first. We don't fix up our family first, and we don't fix up the entire world first. It's really more of a practical thing rather than a.
Well, yeah, but the message that I'm sharing now is radically different than that.
Right.
The message I'm sharing now is not a humanistic message. It isn't. It's a God-centric message. It's not that fundamentally we're all human beings and we just happen to be culturally Jewish, and so the laws of pragmaticism means that I can't spend 24 hours a day focused on it. I'm arguing for something legamre acheret, so different that I would venture the assertion that none of you sitting in this room have heard anything similar from any religious figure, certainly living today. I'm happy to hear not that way. And the reason that I say that is because I didn't. And it took me long times of seeking to discover very, very marginalized voices from decades and decades ago, even though modern Orthodoxy certainly contains some of these aspects. But I'm arguing for something that's even more specific. That's a fundamentally Kabbalistic-oriented experience of the halachic tradition for the sake of taking those values so deeply inculcated through the specific religious guidelines that are for us alone and not for the Umas Ha'olam, as the priesthood sect, that we have our own, mamash this week's parasha, Lenefesh Le'etam Ba'amav, that's not for every Israeli, but the Kohanim have a different thing. So we have 613 mitzvahs. That's mamash for us, for the purpose of then bringing it to the world. What do we do practically that there's so much need within our own community, particularly from the standpoint of education? So I think that there has to be an element of both, and the question is, what's the balance? And there cannot be a blanket assessment, because it so much depends on every person's nature, on every person's circumstance, and every person will inculcate this message and apply it in their own unique way. For some, It won't have to change anything other than the way that they think when they walk down Brent Street and look at people. Even if they don't end up saying a word to anybody, just their consciousness, because we believe that that's not any less real in the broad, matrix of spiritual energies than actually practically doing something. Thought is very powerful. Thinking different is already huge benefit. Just to see the Elokus in every single element of the reality within which we operate, to assume goodness, to assume humanity, to be open to the humanity in another, etc., etc. That's step number one. Step number two, or level number two, might be just smiling at people in the street. And, I'm breaking the stereotype of the way that Orthodox Jews are so insulated or insular that they have no concern for any community outside their own, right? And which in some cases Nebuch is really the truth, right? Nebuch, what can you do? So breaking that stereotype, walking down the street on Shabbos, saying good Shabbos to the Yidden and good morning to the Eno Yehudim. And and thanking them and being effusive, but not just because we're trying to show how moral we are. More than that, because we really mean it. Because we really mean it. Because we care for these people. Because they're in the Tselem Elokim. They're Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. It's an unbelievable thing. A step deeper than that is maybe, and again, this already gets down into the pragmatic details of every person's given circumstance. If a person is at work in an office, where they have relationships that are with their work relationships, to find ways in the context of some of these conversations that memela all fundamentally touch, philosophical ideas, you can begin to, to throw in, like why are we working? Like certain ideas that can start to become a part of the conversation. A level deeper than that might be to just really, and it takes radical courage, to start conversations with people.
On the tube.
Yeah, right. I remember on the
Definitely
tube.
not true.
That's what I'm speaking about now. And there's so many Yidden to reach also, so we're hemorrhaging all over the place. All of it is important. And like I said, different people have different tafkidim. The Lubavitcher Rebbe felt very strongly that every single person should take the card with the 7 mitzvahs, the Sheva mitzvahs b'Hinayach, and actively go and teach. He was almost alone in his vision, and there isn't a strong Messiah, so to speak, for that. And when pushed and pressured to explain where this comes from, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had the courage and the common sense to simply state that we live in a fundamentally different world. And that was in the 60s, 70s than Jews had ever lived. It's a radically different Messias. Jews never had this ability, even in the golden age, so to speak, in Turkey, in the Islamic golden age, the Rambam and so on and so forth. They didn't have the status to be able, that it wasn't the so to speak, free speech, the world in which everyone's equal. So on the one hand, that could be the product of a tremendous amount of distortion. Free speech means that all the idiots can stand and espouse the most extreme views, and that could also, chas v'shalom, be damaging. But as people that see things through the lens of optimism, which means through the lens of emunah, particularly those who are connected to the Baal Shem Tov, who literally, and Rav Kook, if he was a reflection in some way, which I think he was, of the original light of the Baal Shem Tov, where he saw the world getting better and better every second. So today we have an opportunity that we've never, ever had before, which is really to stand up courageously, respectfully, and to be a beacon of light. And so the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, you get out there and you give tefillin to the Yidden, and you give Sheva mitzvahs b'Hinayach to the Goyim. So this is something that we all ought to consider. The practical consideration, like I said before, I think is something that's very, very, very subjective to each person, given their own tchunas hanefesh and their own nature. And I myself, to be totally honest with you, only recently having developed, I would say, into this understanding, am still, the jury's out for me in terms of what practical differences in terms of the way that I spend my time and my energy and focus ought to be. But I want to go back to the first layer Yid, who doesn't do anything in the Olam HaGashmi, just on the level of Machshava. It will already begin to have an impact on the nature of our engagement with Yiddishkeit when it's in the broadest possible context. And I don't want to say that, because it's the broadest context from Mamela, there's value. There's value because it's emes. And to the extent that we're plugged in to the most MS way of looking at what it is to be a Yid, our Yiddishkeit is supercharged. And then when we speak about education, I think again, even if all we do is still focus on the frum kids, if we gave over what we're already giving over in these terms, both from the standpoint of Pnimius HaTorah, which I would say that is the quality or the content, as well as from the standpoint of universalism, which I would say is the quantity or the context, content and context, I think it would revolutionize the way that our youth view this thing called Yiddishkeit. Revolutionize. So that's...
There's definitely a need to move that Yiddishkeit forward.
Sure.
Modernizing.
Sure. We're living in a new world. We cannot fight new battles with the weapons of hundreds of years ago. It's a new world.
Doesn't the ease of communicating all this outwards very much correlate with what we have to communicate? I.e., if free speech was as liberal 500 years ago, we wouldn't. Particularly the fact that most didn't, or many of them didn't even know how to read, and that we live in a completely different reality. So it was never appropriate before now to come up with a message that needs to be heard.
Right.
Does
Right?
that make sense?
Yes, sure. And then look at the technology today. You can have one person sitting in one place teaching one thing, and mamish reaching the whole world. Barry Kaplan already in the 80s wrote about his vision of Mashiach, how it's all technology based. He said we would never have been able to understand how a shofar tekabel shofar gadol in one place, barring a miracle, but lav dafka, miracles are part of the messianic development. Lav dafka, at least from the Rambam's perspective, it's a very naturalistic, technical progression. So how could every single person in the world hear the shofar? But today with TikTok, you can imagine, where one thing happens and an instant later, trillions and trillions of times over, billions of people, or at least millions of people all over the world are privy to that in that moment. And I think something so much deeper is happening with technology, where we have somehow, and again, it's always zelu umazeh, so the possibility of misinformation, disinformation, the possibility of corrupted narratives and one-sided perspectives and groupthink among echo chambers of what's it called, of algorithms in the hands of nefarious actors, v'chulei, all of that exists. But yes, that's all true. But you know what else is true? Never before in history could something happen in one place and people who weren't even there, and all the more so, one of the people who were there, have the experience of seeing what it was that happened from 30 different angles. That was the sum that was greater than any one of the perspectives of the one person standing there. How is this so? Because today all of us have cameras on our phones. And the minute that something happens, 20 people are whipping out their phones. George Floyd, for example, what happened there that's so disputed, right? Imagine if there were people on the other side of the street taking video. How many things have happened that way where we were able to see things from different perspectives, even within the battle over the narrative of things going on in Gaza for the last 7 months, which is a mess, let's say. Is a huge mevucha gedola ad l'ma'od, and there's so much to speak about there. But aside from that, in the early days, you remember, they killed 500 people, they bombed the hospital, and then with video footage from many different perspectives, because at that point the damage had already been done, it was possible to demonstrate that this was a rocket that they themselves had fired that very clearly had come back into the place. And any objective person who wasn't rooted in a prior narrative would be able to see that very, very clearly. Right? So in a certain way, Hashem is bringing about a das atzum into the world that I think is much more aligned with MS seen as being a multifaceted truth as opposed to any black over white, because that's the sum total of the Gilui Velokus. I think we're living in times that are nifla v'noira. Now remember, zelu umazeh aselikim, to the direct proportionality and relation to the light or the potential for light, tremendous darkness. But we're not a people that are here to contend with darkness, so that's not our job. How do you get rid of darkness? Moisef Ar. And the opportunity today to be Moisef Ar, it'll take courage. It'll take courage to reformulate our educational system in such a way that we can alter both the content and the context with nothing new, but old ideas, kiviyachal, that were always there, that merited for a substantial process of progressional gilui or disclosure throughout our history until this moment in time where it's so easy to teach. We have all the access and all the concepts and all the tools. I think that we can do this. I really
With
do.
the help of AI.
I really do. With the help of the AI Bishter. the AI Bishter. With the help of the Abishter and also his incredible revelations through the technology technology that continues to unfold. Unfortunately for both me and for you, we did not go weiter today. Which, or maybe it is, just not in the text. That's the truth. Baruch Hashem, we did go weiter. I'm happy to discuss all of these things in greater depth. They are part of my personal, continual, I would hope, evolution in the way that I think, in the way that I see the world. Ultimately, that's another beautiful thing about the democratic, free societies that we live in that are still free to some extent, at least in relation to other places in the world. Every person is entitled to their perspective. And so, chas v'shalom, I don't mean to put what I think onto anybody, but what I can do is just to say as clearly and as loudly as I possibly can what I personally believe to be aligned with the MS. And then to see how many other neshamas resonate with that. Not all will, that's fine. But the neshamas that do resonate with it and are courageous enough and free enough from old ways of thinking to begin to do the work necessary to move things forward, so then we need to become allies and we need to do that because change needs to happen. Because we're against the status quo. As good as the status quo might be in so many different ways, but it's still the status quo, and as far as I checked, the Shekhinah is still in Galus. And so there's still work to do, la'avda u'lushamra. We should merit a mamish be Shabbos to Yidden who march the whole 6 days of the week with this me'ein olam habedika perspective of really knowing what life is about and doing whatever we can in our own personal lives. That's also important, our own personal avodas, and within our practical efforts in bein adam l'makim through the system of halacha and the Torah to the best of our ability, through bein adam l'chavera, but really rooted primarily in a real relationship and care for bein adam l'makim and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's considerations in having created this world, which should really matter to us, maybe more than anything else. And when we put these three things together, our Yiddishkeit is supercharged. The meaning factor in our lives, vis-a-vis the broadest possible vision, is even if nothing practical changes, right? Like I mentioned before, just in terms of our self-understanding, our Jewish pride in the most Jewish sense of the word, in terms of what Judaism is, and in terms of what pride really could mean. To mamish stand up with the confidence of knowing we're not little, what can you do? Just little Yidden, still wrapping black boxes on our hands for no reason. After thousands of years in a world that seems to have progressed so far beyond us, or we're mamish spiritual warriors with Hashem's spark inside of us, with Shabbos at the end of time, with everything that Shabbos encapsulates. And to the degree that we look at Shabbos as Shabbos really ought to be looked at, we end up looking at Yiddishkeit the way Yiddishkeit ought to be looked at. Yiddishkeit then is able to have its intended impact on our way of thinking and on our way of feeling, maybe even more importantly. And Manela, it brings practical changes to the world, and in all the ways that we want to see the world change. That's my bracha to myself, it's my bracha to all of us. We should be zeicha. We should be zeicha to be mevakish emes, and to bring that emes to many millions of people who are thirsty for the light of the guide. For the light of the guide. Chaim lebracha, should be zeicha. Chaim.